interesting. We're seeing the figures here. The second uptick for inflation for second consecutive month. What do you make of these numbers?
Well, it's actually not surprising. You remember the last time I also came in here when we were talking about the MPC and all that. I mentioned that, of course, we're going to have a higher trajectory relating to, inflation, whether it's core inflation, whether it's headline inflation, whatever terminology you use. I mean, CPI is definitely, it's going to be on the increase. It's really not surprising, though, because, of course, we've seen some of the factors, indicators for such, tendencies for increase in the inflation, really. And then if you look at it from that position, you could also be looking at why is all of this going. It's not surprising. Of course, as the elections, it has a lot of, implications beyond the fact that, production in terms of goods and services are also not matching. Nigeria is more import dependency. And as the FX market, as it appears, the foreign exchange, as it also triggers, you've seen relatively the previous period last week, even last week, recently the dollar, was, rising against the naira. So some of these tend to have that implication. And we are yet to, you will see the tendency that will also be that towards as we approach November, December, you know this also seasonal period, festive period, a lot of things. In fact, some manufacturers, importers have intensified their import dependency and, importation. This is also going to be affecting the cost of production and all the rest of them. So you find a situation where this is still going to high. I expect, like I predicted last month, this is still going to increase beyond the current position.
I'd like you to speak on food inflation.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot on that. It's at 13.31% currently.
Yeah.
We know that there's flooding has been crazy. Over 18 states, about 18 states in the country affected by flooding, and this is actually the food belt of the country. We're seeing also insecurity in that region. We've been dealing with the farmer herder crisis for quite a bit, in that part of the world. I'd like you to speak to how you see this impacting food prices going forward.
No, you see, when you look at all of these, you see there are what we call direct relationship. As the crisis increases, there are tendencies that you're going to have more problem in terms of food production, especially from the flood issues and all that. But beyond that, like Maslow needs of a hierarchy of needs, specify basic needs, psychological and the self-actualization. The key components of all of this relates to food. And so if the food area, of course, we have no doubt, really, today in Nigeria that the North is supplying us at least over 60 to 70% of the food consumed in this country. Apart from rural areas who, in terms of subsistence, in producing what they eat and all that, and the effect of climate change, it definitely will. Of course, the more we have in terms of negative outcome from the climate change, the more prices definitely will increase. Prices of food, even prices of transport, a lot of other components, just like what you have when you are dealing with, the FX market. The importation of goods is affected by the rise of the rise of dollar against naira. The implication, therefore, is that if dollar rises, naira value falls, and then the implication is a rise in interest. So if there is a tendency or preponderances for climate change on the negative look, there's definitely going to be a positive increase in terms of price outcome of food.
Looking down the line, I would like to look at the you talked about the political climate and all that. Right. We're seeing that campaign season will begin sometime in November.
Right.
And then there's a lot expected about, election spending coming in at that period, and we're seeing this is just September. We're going to get the figures for October later on, and then maybe sometime in the future for November. That's for inflation figures. Right. How do you see this coming months playing out?
Again, if you put all of these together in the CPI index, right, you find out that even from what is happening, I'm not a political pundit, really, but it's a clear indication of what is going on in the country. I mean, we hear even some, the politicians themselves are confessing on how vote buying, this and that and all that. We've seen what happened in Ekiti. We've seen what happened in Osun. If you look at the CPI of Ekiti and Osun now, because of the push you know, because these are money push inflation, you know, without backing it with production. And you find a situation where demand, as a matter of fact, we are stripped supply. So if the supply of goods is not there, and there is quantum, in economics, they call it quantum push in terms of, you know, quantity of money being chasing. So you find a situation where this will happen. It's not going to be surprising. We expect it that as the campaign, you know, because it's all about, somebody said, you can't even win anything without, no matter how integrity plays out, you must spend money in politics. And in spending money politics is cash that they dish out. So the impact of that is to trigger the cost of food.
Yeah. Okay, so finally and real quickly,
yeah,
you know, I'd like you to speak to, if you were wearing the hat right now as one of the MPC members and you're seeing this, you know, coming out in there, as we're going to the final MPC of the year, you know, what would you make out, you know, on what we should do for inflation?
Again, what has been the major objective of the MPC, and of course CBN and the Nigerian economy basically from this dimension, is to regulate and ensure that interest rate and the FX rate is significantly controlled, to be able to control the all the other spendings in terms of inflation. So the other time we're talking about whether they were going to move it from 14 to whatever, and I said that in view of the preponderances and the tendencies of increase in the structures, that is in terms of the components of what makes up inflation, there's likely to be an increase. Because if you increase, even though it has, it plays out like an oxymoron, you increase interest rate, the impact is to reduce and then perhaps reduce the money supply. But again, the effect is that when they increase it, it's also going to impact on investment as to how people will get money and all that. But so it's left for CBN to be looking at a very possible way to, look at the mismatch between the policy mix and all that.
So we'll be looking at how the budget policy.
But most likely, I believe most likely, even though they are still teetering it,